Good morning. We are ready to get started. Thank you for being here on this cold day. Thank you for watching at home if you are there, and thank you to all of our Faith in Action committees for telling us today about food insecurity. If you were here last week, you know that we participated in Rise Against Hunger, which is a really fun, fast-paced activity. Now we get to reflect on what it means for our church locally and globally to support people who are in need. So if we can open with a prayer. Let us pray. O Lord, whose blessed Son came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, bless, we beseech thee, all who following in his steps give themselves to the service of others, that with wisdom, patience, and courage they may minister in his name to the suffering, the friendless, the hungry, and the needy, for the love of him who laid down his life for us, the same thy Son, our Savior, Jesus Christ, who liveth and reigneth with thee in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And I'm going to turn this over to Scott.
Thank you. And we will find out how amateurs deal with technology. The program Faith in Action committees, which we have 3, and Creation Care, Global Mission, and Outreach. We'll hear from all 3 committees, and then at the end have time for some conversation. Neil Peterson will talk about Creation Care and global issues. Jill Conrad will follow with what we are doing in our programs here in the church overseas. Maybe that's not a good word, but it was when I was a child. And then I'll be back and talk about what we're doing locally. We want to thank Meg Flournoy, and I hope people can hear. I can't tell. We want to thank Meg Flournoy, who's been our vestry liaison to all 3 committees for the last 3 years. We've had a lot of support and a lot of insight from her participation, and though she's no longer on the vestry, she will stay with our committee, and we're glad of that. We welcome Anita Howell as our new vestry liaison, who is now new to the vestry also. And she's, I hope, watching this by virtual, as she's in Colorado right now. Collectively, we're happy to be back to in-person meetings, although we still have the option and the need for virtual or Zoom meetings to make sure everybody can stay in it along with us. And we're going to present a little bit more in-depth information about food insecurity and how and where COTC parishioners support that issue and activity. Each committee's assigned, and I hope we will all use 10 minutes or maybe a little bit less so that we can have questions and answers at the end of the period. And I guess the last piece on this brief introduction is that all of our committees, but Faith in Action, we get an allocation every year from the vestry that we get to use for our activities. And so this is a thank you also to the vestry for the allocation, but it's really a thank you to everybody else who comes to the church, participates, pledges, supports the budget, and supports some of the activities which are events that we'll talk about later, in which we as individual members buy or provide something for others in need in other nonprofit organizations. I wish to thank those of you who are here and those of you who are at home. And I was told don't do a joke at the beginning, but I think this is not a joke, but I think it's appropriate. We prayed for a day which we would have good light conditions in here so that the slideshow would be able to be seen. And what do you know? Our prayers were answered. I'm going to, if I can move a page here, run through. A quick snapshot about food insecurity, and then let Neil come up and take the program. Populations at risk, according to the international organizations that monitor the health of global population, organizations such as the UN, we see about 2.3 billion people, or almost a third of the total population, are moderately or severely food insecure. And our news for the last year and a half has only made us more aware of this with what's happened in Haiti and what's happened in Ukraine and the earthquakes in Turkey and other things. The percentage of people in food insecurity in Africa is about double what it is worldwide, 60%. South America is over 40%. These compared to the U.S., it's about 10.2%. So while we are much better on a scale by country, we still have a lot of people in 10.2%. Orange County, we also have just about the same percentage. Severe food insecurity is defined as not having had a meal today and not knowing when there might be a next meal, which is a great physical, nutritional, psychological problem. 2.3 billion people, about 40%, 924 million of the population face this insecurity at that severe level. They don't know if they're going to eat tomorrow or not. Children under the age of 5, there's some additional difficulties. 45 million children suffering from wasting, and that condition increases a child's risk of death by about 12 times. And then there's another 149 million who are not getting enough nutrition and have stunted physical, psychological growth. So there is a lot to accomplish to reach the desired end of food insecurity. We hope to help playing our part. Neil?
Good morning. Good to have you here. The Creation Care Committee's portion of this presentation will focus on 3 of the major contributors to global food insecurity. They are the warming of the Earth's atmosphere, due primarily to the increase in greenhouse gases, industrial agriculture, and food waste. So let's start with the warming of the Earth's atmosphere. It's increasingly apparent that the warming of the Earth's oceans and atmosphere is creating many more extreme weather events, many of which negatively impact the world's food supply. Recent examples include the flooding of rice fields in Pakistan and the drought in the western United States. I guess now we could say the floods in the western United States that threaten farms in California. The Earth's warming also results in crops no longer thriving in their current locations. This translates into less productivity per acre, and in some cases to the need to relocate farms to higher elevations or to latitudes closer to the poles. Good examples there would be coffee, which is a farms that are moving up the mountains, and vineyards in Europe, in Italy and Spain, that are moving to Scotland. To make matters worse, this lost productivity is occurring while an increasing population, of course, is in need of more food. And so this is why the climate crisis is at the very heart of the food insecurity that the world is facing. And it must be addressed aggressively and right now. Now moving to industrial agriculture and the demand for meat. The world's population now exceeds 8 billion people, and by the end of the century is projected to be about 11 billion. So not only are current farms likely to be less productive due to climate change, but the population increase will require dedicating more and more land to agriculture at the expense of forests that we need in order to absorb carbon dioxide. This conflict between the need for more land for farming and grazing and the need to protect our remaining forests is worsened if the world's demand for meat, particularly beef and pork, remains at the current level or increases. The current devastation of the Amazon is largely attributable to the clearing of land to either graze cattle or grow soybeans and other crops to feed the cattle. The increasing demand for food also has led to industrial farming practices that extract nutrients from the soil, thereby turning rich soil into nutrient-deficient dirt. And this requires farmers to use massive amounts of nitrogen-based fertilizer that releases nitrous oxide, which is one of the worst greenhouse gases. So instead, farmers need to be incentivized to incorporate regenerative farming practices to promote healthy soil. So regenerative farming practices include rotating crops, planting cover crops, not tilling the soil unnecessarily, basically putting nitrogen back into the soil organically rather than with chemical fertilizers. In addition, this is a pretty picture. On the left side, you can't see all those, you might see the dots, those are all cows. And it's pretty self-explanatory what this looks like. In livestock feedlots and massive poultry farms create unsafe conditions for both animals as well as humans. Obviously, a recent example is the bird flu outbreak, where 58 million chickens are destroyed just in the United States. Farming practices need to improve, and government agencies need to stop incentivizing meat production and instead provide subsidies for farmers growing vegetables, fruits, grains, legumes for human, not animal consumption. You might be surprised to learn that avoiding meat and dairy products is the single biggest way to reduce our environmental impact on the planet. Without meat and dairy consumption, global farmland use could be reduced by more than 75%, an area equivalent to the United States, China, the European Union, and Australia combined. And there would still be sufficient land to meet the world's food supply. Eating meat is simply an inefficient way to meet humans' nutrition needs. While meat and dairy provides just 18% of calories and 37% of protein, it uses the vast majority, 83% of the farmland, and it produces 60% of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions. And interestingly, soberingly, 86% of the mammals on Earth today are either humans or the livestock we eat. The third issue I want to address is food waste. 1/3 of the food that is grown in the United States ends up uneaten in landfills or wasting in farmers' fields. Hard to believe. This is both inefficient and a major source of the methane that landfills produce. Food waste accounts for 22% of the solid waste in landfills. Furthermore, food loss and waste in the United States results in the waste of resources that could be used for other purposes. It wastes the equivalent of a land mass the size of California and New York. It wastes enough water to supply 50 million homes. The annual greenhouse gas emissions from food loss and waste in the United States equate to the carbon dioxide emissions of 42 coal-powered power plants. And sadly, this uneaten food contains enough calories to feed more than 150 million Americans. So hunger in America could be eliminated if we simply reduce the amount of food that we waste and channel it to those in need. So what can you do to protect the Earth's environment, promote sustainable consumption, and reduce food waste? You can join and support organizations that promote regenerative farming practices and the shift toward a sustainable plant-based diet for the world's population. You can support local farmers that practice regenerative farming and are reducing waste in their fields. You can support grocery stores and restaurants that are finding creative ways to donate or sell leftover or unwanted food at a reduced rate and are composting of what remains. You can try to incorporate more plant-based foods into your diet while reducing your meat consumption. And we can all shop wisely and plan menus with the goal of not discarding any leftover food from our refrigerators. And of course, compost food scraps at the church or at other locations in the area. And this is a picture of the Brooks composting operation, massive operation in Chatham County, where our compostable matter goes and it gets turned into compost. It goes back into the soil, which means we're putting carbon back into the soil. And here are some excellent films on restorative farming and soil conservation. I will, if you read our newsletter, I'll make sure we put some links in there for these films. So finally, what is the Creation Care Committee doing? Well, in terms of education, we post a weekly entry in the Monday Notes under the heading of Caring for God's Creation. At the end of each entry is a link to the monthly newsletter that we publish, and I hope you'll take the opportunity to read those. Click on them and read them. Composting, as we've shared, is critical to keep food waste out of the landfill. So we've purchased the cabinet over here in the front of the room for you to sort compostables, recyclables, and trash. And outside, we ask you to deposit your compostable food waste brought from home in the 6 containers located at the top of the driveway. And so far, we've diverted more than 30 tons of organic waste from the landfill, 30 tons, which has generated 6,000 pounds of compost that's gone back into the ground. In terms of advocacy, we partner with nonprofit organizations such as Interfaith Creation Care of the Triangle and Interfaith Power and Light, as well as with the Episcopal Diocese. We recognize and publicize other organizations that promote policies, legislation, regulations, and practices that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions and allow farmers to adapt to climate change. We provide direct support for Farmer Food Share, the Little Way Farms, the Haiti Reforestation Partnership, and the Triangle Land Conservancy. And we promote reuse, recycling, composting, and energy conservation here at our church. We've supported efforts to use washable or compostable utensils, cups, and to ensure that all paper products are either recycled or composted. And currently we're investigating the feasibility of solar panels for the church in order to reduce our carbon footprint. And we encourage you to join our committee. We have about a dozen members. We also have Friends of Creation Care if you don't want to be on a committee, and there's a sign-up sheet for the 3 committees if you want to join us. So in summary, if we are to reduce food insecurity on a global level, the rate at which the world's atmosphere and oceans are warming must be reduced. And at the same time, infrastructure must be built to cope with the destructive effects of the global warming that's already baked into the system. Secondly, the amount of land mass devoted to farming needs to stabilize or even be reduced and return to its natural setting. As I've attempted to demonstrate this morning, the 2 most effective ways to make this happen is for the world's population, particularly those of us in the developed world, to transition to a primarily plant-based diet and to reduce the amount of food that goes uneaten. Jill? You want to hold this? You want...
Good morning. I am going to talk about our Global Mission Committee, and we currently have 2 relationships globally, one in South Africa and one in Ecuador. In South Africa, we have had a 10-year relationship with Kwaza College and the founder of the school, Reverend Sharon Denny. And the word college is a little bit misleading. In South Africa, they use it differently. The school actually begins at the pre-primary care level and goes on through the 7th grade. Most of the students who attend Kwaza live in an informal settlement called Daggafontein. It is home to 12,000 residents who have no indoor plumbing and no municipal electricity. The water they get is from one of 5 or 6 water spigots throughout the settlement. And the Global Mission Committee provides scholarships so that some of these children can attend Kwaza. Not only do the children receive an education when they go to Kwaza, they are also receiving 2 meals a day. This is really important because it may be the only 2 meals they are getting. No dinner is waiting for them at home, probably. And sometimes they even get orange slices. During COVID, all of the residents in South Africa were required to stay at home to try and keep the disease from spreading. Kwaza had to temporarily close its doors, as did all the schools in South Africa. Once the restrictions were eased a bit, Mother Sharon was able to have food delivered to Kwaza, and she and some staff members repackaged the food and distributed it to Kwaza families. Here you'll see a mother with a child holding 2 bags of groceries. These may be the only groceries that she'll receive for a period of time. And the Global Mission Committee also provided funds to help with food insecurity during this time period. In addition to Kwaza, we also have a relationship in Ecuador. This started with Cameron Vivenco. Some of you may know that Cameron actually grew up in the Chapel of the Cross, and she is now a missionary in Quito, Ecuador. And through Cameron, we got to meet Reverend Lourdes, who is the rector of Cristo Librador, an Episcopal church in Ecuador. And in 2019, we were able to secure a grant from the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina. And then along with funds from the Global Mission Committee, they were able to establish a micro market in their church. And what they do is they buy food in bulk, they repackage it, and then sell it to the community at much better prices than what individuals could buy the food for elsewhere. And this has become so popular and so successful that a group of women have recently requested that an oven be placed in the market so that they can bake bread and bake chicken so that they can sell them at lunchtime to increase income and food diversity. Here is Reverend Lourdes weighing out rice for one of the customers. And this photo shows 3 of our Global Mission Committee members who visited there in 2020. Cameron Vivenco is the one on the right, and Reverend Lourdes is the second from the left. And this picture was taken in 2020. We go down to Ecuador periodically. And then the funds that, or profits that the micro market will make will be used to help the elderly in the area who need assistance as well. And then, in addition to our 2 long-term partners, we also help nonprofit organizations who are involved globally trying to reduce food insecurity. Rise Against Hunger is one of them. Last week, we were one of the co-sponsors of this event, which was just so successful. And not only does Rise Against Hunger provide these packaged meals for those who need food immediately, they also work on long-term solutions for food insecurity. And a perfect example is in Zimbabwe. This photo was taken at a school in Zimbabwe. In 2019, Zimbabwe had the worst drought in 35 years. People were going hungry. So Rise Against Hunger, along with a nonprofit local organization, provided packaged meals, just like what we did last week, to feed the children who were starving. But they took it a step further. They created community gardens in 5 of the schools. They took it another step further. They helped the local farmers decide which crops would be the best to plant. They worked on farming techniques with them, and they brought in post-harvest production machinery to make them more efficient. And they learned, as a result of providing the 5 schools where they had these community gardens, they discovered that school attendance rose by 35%. That is a great benefit for providing meals at school. And Rise Against Hunger is also involved in South Africa. Don't you just love the joy on her face? I smile every single time I see this photograph. In addition to Rise Against Hunger, we also provide donations to Episcopal Relief and Development. ERD also is involved with helping when there's a crisis or disaster situation, so immediate needs, but they also work on, again, long-term solutions to food insecurity, working with individuals, various parts of the world. Here at this slide, you can see they were there for the earthquake in Turkey and Syria recently. And with the solving the long-term hunger issue, they have various programs, one of which is Gifts for Life. Individuals can select various items which will help families long-term. And pre-COVID, we actually asked our Sunday school students to help us determine how we should spend our money to help with Gifts for Life. We gave them a budget. We told them their choices. They selected a variety of items, but one of them was a flock of chickens. So a flock of chickens would be given to a family to help them with their food insecurity, but also provide income to the family. And then the third nonprofit that we have been providing funds is World Central Kitchen. World Central Kitchen provides help immediately. They provide meals in disaster or in crisis situations. The founder of World Central Kitchen is a chef, and he connects with chefs and restaurants in areas so that they can quickly get up and running. And very often they are the first ones at the scene. Here you can see them packaging food in Ukraine, and they also have been in the earthquake area of Turkey and Syria. They have already provided 3.5 million meals in that area. And I'm going to close my presentation with a quote from the founder of World Central Kitchen, and he says, "You see, food relief is not just a meal that keeps hunger away. It is a plate of hope. You'd be amazed at the power of a plate of food. It can change the world, and so can you." Thank you.
Personally, I'd like to thank Neil and Jill for the expansive and really complete sets of information about global, reaching to local, local reaching to global, and the activities that we don't all see as parishioners of other parts of the church and the organization. With that said, I guess what I would like to do is move to local activities, and if I can do it that way. I'd like to move to local activities. And everybody in the room, I think, is familiar with outreach, just as you were familiar with global and just as you were familiar with creation care, but not necessarily everything that each of the committees does, and not necessarily seeing some of the indirect connections between one type of support and what that might do for an individual family. So, with regard to food support and aid, direct food support is provided in the form of contributions, parishioners giving for specific events, and in-person events where we can attend and do things and assist, like Habitat for Humanity in building. These organizations, Interfaith Council for Social Services of Orange County, which Chapel of the Cross was a founding member of the Interfaith Council organization. Crop Hunger Walk, which is a program by Church World Service and Crop, and the larger Episcopal Church in the United States was one of the founding members of the National Council of Churches, which then is Church World Service and Crop. Rise Against Hunger, which we've spoken about already a little bit. El Buen Pastor, which is a Episcopal parish in Durham, which we were fortunate to be able to add to our program and support activities in 2022, and we'll be able to keep it in 2023. And then Meals on Wheels, where we donate a financial amount each year, and then we have members, some even in this room, who have been or are currently drivers delivering meals for Meals on Wheels. The Interfaith Council for Social Services, for Social Services has its new building on West Main Street and had a rocky and rough period through the COVID years. Hopefully it would have been months, but years. And the Chapel of the Cross, along with other faith communities, provided money for the capital budget to build the building. And we have, for many years, on a regular basis, provided operating income support for the activities. Project 5000, which has been a long-standing activity here. And I'll say, all of us, we, the large parish, those in the room, those at home, contributed massively to a successful Project 5000 food drive last November. Having had it postponed and retimed and trying to work with COVID conditions and other things, by last fall, when IFC was just beginning to think that they were going to be able to get open, they had bare or almost bare shelves for their food supply or their food pantry activity. And so it was very fortunate that we were able to have such a good program last November. The numbers were pretty staggering. If you remember, we had bags that were not boxes or shopping bags from Harris Teeter, but bags that we specially ordered to make sure that we could get bags and boxes returned and be reused. But in the process, we also got collections of 270 plus bags that were loaded with what in effect is a meal for a 4-person household for 2 days within that one bag. And in total, that's 2,150 meals that we were able to provide and support. Next year, our goal, announced here today for the first time, is going to be 300 bags. And so we will push even harder in the fall to have help to reach 300. Food kitchen or the community kitchen at IFC has reopened. They're now serving inside meals rather than meals in boxes or in containers at the door. And cook teams have been reestablished. In this slide and the following slide, even with masks, you might be able to see somebody that you know. and an idea of the food: protein, vegetables, rice, starch, a balanced meal that's not likely to be gotten by many of the people that depend upon IFC in any other way. Crop Hunger Walk. Last year was year 35 of the actual physical walk. We missed a couple of years in there of the physical walk, and we had virtual walks. But it's been very well received for a long time in the community. Last year we were fortunate to get the mayor of Chapel Hill and the mayor of Carrboro to kick off the program. We raised $50,000. Interestingly, about $48,000 of that was really raised online and not at the walk. Nevertheless, the walk was very successful as a community activity, bringing people together, and we had approximately 150 walkers. And I would say it was on the Sunday after UNC beat Duke on the Saturday to go to the Final Four. And so I guess we were probably very surprised that we had more than 25 walkers out there. But as you see, IFC is the local partner with Church World Service. 25% of the funds that are collected in this for the Chapel Hill Carrboro Walk goes to the IFC, and the remainder goes to Church World Service. And again, it's a multi-generational walk. Again, on the left, you might see parishioners that you have known for quite a while. And on the right, there's just an outpouring of people waiting to get started on the walk. CROP, Christian Rural Overseas Program, is an activity within Church World Service. And Church World Service, in the distribution of food, food supplies, financial when it's necessary, really works around the globe, and it does many of the same things that Jill was able to present about Episcopal relief and development and other activities. CROP, or Church World Service, in the past year has been very active in Ukraine, has been very active in Haiti, and has now rolled into some work in Turkey and other things. So we're part of several organizations, some at the Global Mission, some at the Outreach, but all of those are within the Chapel of the Cross umbrella of providing support. This coming summer, another sales pitch, if you will, we'll have the 36th annual physical walk, and it will be Sunday, June 4th, no conflict with basketball season, and it will be from 2 to 4 p.m., and it will start in the Town Commons in Carrboro, and we'll follow the path that has been a path for many years, Carrboro to Chapel Hill, to the UNC campus, and back to Carrboro for the completion of the walk and the celebration of completion of the walk. And some of the younger people get there faster than some of the older people for that celebration. Rise Against Hunger, jointly sponsored, as Jill said, by Global Mission and Outreach. Pretty staggering numbers, 10,152 meals packed in approximately a 55-minute period. That's a lot of good work by a lot of people who have supported annually, and some new people this year who came who had not participated because we had missed it for the 2 years before this. Altogether, we've been supporting Rise Against Hunger for a 12-year period, 2 years which we, from the part of being active and doing meals, we missed. But in the 10 years, we've packed 100,000 meals for distribution. And again, Rise Against Hunger fits with CROP, fits with Episcopal Relief and Development, and does support different activities aimed at getting much to the local level so families can be self-sufficient or more self-sufficient than they have been able to be. And so that's a big part of ministry, is not writing a check, but providing assistance and help. El Buen Pastor, as I mentioned, in Durham, North Carolina. I'm going to read this so I make sure I get this right. Many of you, or some of you, might be familiar with El Buen Pastor. It's an Episcopal church, founded in 1971, and it worships in Spanish. If you look at their website, there is a little bit of a trick on the information bar where you can switch from their Spanish language to their English language. And if you're intrepid enough to just click and push buttons, you will find that. Since 2009, it's run a food distribution program. The food distribution program now operating in the first Saturday of the month, and food is received from grocery stores, Trader Joe, Wegmans, and others that are just at or just beyond what they call, and we all understand to be, an expiration date, which is not an expiration date on the health of the food, but it's an expiration date in order to try to move things through the stores and respond to global corporate interests and some other things like that. So when you have an expiration date, it doesn't necessarily mean it's no good. So, in addition to those supplies, fresh food does come from the Interfaith Food Shuttle. All these deliveries of food arrive, they are packaged, and then they are distributed. The food recipients are identified primarily by grassroots activity, word of mouth, other community networking. And 100 or more families really get served at each distribution on that one time per month. Last year we were able to include that El Buen Pastor in our outreach budget for financial support directly, and we have, as of January this year, begun to be able to have and have had volunteers, Episcopal Campus Ministry, actually a week ago, while others of us were at the St. Paul's Walk for St. Paul's Village senior housing. Indirect support, or indirect food security support in the language. In addition to the organizations we've talked about, there are other organizations that outreach serves in the fashion of providing financial support and sometimes other indirect support, but includes providing school supplies, household supplies, gifts at Christmas. All of these go to reduce or to increase the opportunity, I should probably phrase it, for those families to have needed supplies, needed school supplies, clothing, gifts for Christmas, and make it possible for those families to have less stress on their budget and be able to use their budget for more food, utilities, rent, and other health-related types of things. And so, even though it may not sound as if indirect means something, it means a great deal with respect to how much an individual family has for its own budget and how it can make decisions. The Refugee Support Center, larger organization supported by Chapel of the Cross and by other faith communities. In 2022, you can see the information here, school supplies that reached 372 students, all grades, all ages, from kindergarten through seniors in high school. Donations for this, just like with Project 5000, come from individual parishioners, buying, supplying, dropping off, and delivering. And so a really large thank you to everybody in the parish who does that type of activity. Another sales pitch, another activity we can participate in is the 2023 supply drive will start in late June and early July in preparation for school in August starting. These are the organizations that fall into additional activities not directly related to food. Habitat for Humanity, Afghan immigrant families. Mary Kent, thank you so much. Freedom House, Reentry House, STEM, or STEAM as it might be called this year, which is a summer camp on science, technology, energy, math, and the little A added in there means art. That will be held again in Chapel of the Cross during the summer. St. Paul 5K Walk and Club Nova. And these are all things that we get a lot of direct participation in addition to the financial support the committee can make. With that, thank you for your patience. And we have some time, questions and answers, discussion, how to participate over on this table. There's a Faith in Action handout. We said it was going to be at the seat, but when we saw how many chairs there were, we changed our plan. But it's over there and gives you, as Neil and Jill both presented, organizations that you can work with, deal with, support individually if you wish. Nonprofit organizations, and that's handout at this handout over there also. And then in that, and then a reprint of what was the 2022 annual report section that covered Faith in Action, all three organizations. So thank you for your time and your interest. And questions? Do you want a microphone, Betsy? As this gets recorded, you know, they give commands from the top to make sure voices get on.
Oh, is that what it is? Anyway, glad for people to be here. I just wanted to say a word about Justice United, which is an organization that's multi-faith, multiracial, strictly nonpartisan, county-wide, dedicated to engaging people in our community to participate fully in decision-making processes on issues that affect their lives. And it's, as I say, it is nonpartisan. There are many churches, and for example, Habitat for Humanity is also a member of Justice United, and work on issues. For example, in Rogers Road, people were walking in the winter for 2 miles in the dark because the buses didn't go that far and there was no lighting. And so Justice United took that on as one issue. There's going to be a county-wide meeting on Zoom on Tuesday, and everyone is welcome to sign on and list their concerns about what we should work on next, and also to hear what we're working on now. Thank you.
I'm not sure I've been an MC where I need to maybe take the microphone around, but if there are other questions or comments, certainly happy to continue this discussion. And if there aren't, and people are starved for caffeine, I think there's coffee back there. Pardon? Yeah. So, on behalf of all three committees, under the Faith in Action umbrella, thank you all for being here, listening to what we can report on. Some of it, they're not completely good news of global food insecurity, translating back down to what we can do locally, overseas, as I learned it, and globally to pay attention and affect better outcomes for the next 10, 40, 50, 100 years. Thank you.